Oh, not a beach theme?
This is a little embarrassing.
A little awkward.
We'll be back.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Hello. Sorry about that little wardrobe malfunction there. But we're here.
Next time we'll have a beach party.
Really?
Well,
we got to get Chris and Jen on board with
we'll
that.
Talk about it.
We're here for another parenting infusion, and we're very excited. Last week we talked about answering some of your questions on that you sent in on Slido, but we're actually going to save those for next week when we're going to be joined by Chris and Jenna Hippie for a little Q&A. We have lots of questions for them actually about how to parent as our kids grow up. So we're really excited about that.
Yeah, so just a quick recap. Last week we talked about 2 parenting upgrades. The first was intentionality. We talked about how intentional parenting is very relational, how it's instructional, and intentional parenting asks the Holy Spirit and listens for answers and listens and asks for help. And then the other upgrade we talked about were in the areas of fun, affection, and affirmation. So if you haven't had a chance to listen to last week's teaching, we highly encourage you to go back and listen to week 1 of our parenting infusion.
Yeah, it was really good and super fun to make. And I have some really good memes in there, so check those out. Today we're coming at you with 2 big topics. The first one, discipline. That one's going to be really fun to dig into. Kind of heavy, but we can get through that. The second one is communication. And that one's really important, and they go hand in hand. If you don't have good communication with your discipline, then things can fall apart. So we'll go into detail about those 2 there. We're also going to bring you a little rule that we have called the 80% rule.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll start with discipline. You know, it's funny, as we were preparing to teach, I feel like the Lord gave us plenty of opportunities to work through some of these this week with our children. So
opportunities meaning things came up that we had to take care of.
Yes. So some synonyms for the word discipline are to train, to teach, to drill, to coach, to educate. So I think it's important to remember that discipline doesn't always have a negative, or it shouldn't have a negative connotation or feeling with it, but it's really an opportunity to train, teach, coach, educate, and drill our children. Yeah,
that's good. And we have a verse for that Andrew's going to read that really ties all of this in together.
Mm-hmm. So this is from Hebrews 12, 9 through 11. It says, "Besides this, we have had earthly fathers who disciplined us, and we respected them. Shall we not much more be subject to the Father of the Spirit and live? For they disciplined us for a short time as it seemed best to them, but he disciplines us for our good, that we may share in his holiness." And this is one of my favorite verses. For in the moment, all discipline seems painful rather than pleasant.
Yep.
But later it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. I'm going to read that last verse one more time. For the moment, all discipline seems painful rather than pleasant. Yeah. But later it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it.
Yeah, and kind of what we get from that with discipline is 3 main things. Discipline is for our good, for our kids' good, and not shameful. And that's a important last part there. Discipline is not shaming our kids.
Yeah.
It's important to remember that because we don't want to do things that are harmful to our kids.
Right.
But we need to still be consistent and really make sure that we're building our kids up and not just letting things go.
Yeah, and God wants us to discipline in a way that doesn't cause damage, but there's also damage that comes from a lack of discipline. And so we want to remember that, like it said, discipline might be uncomfortable, but it doesn't need to cause damage, and that's not the goal.
Yeah.
So many of us think of discipline as punishment, that they're the same, but really they're not. Punishment is, like, one way we can think about punishment is that it's giving our kids something they deserve, or they did something wrong, so they need to be taught a lesson, which, like, of course, that is true that when they make bad choices, we use the phrase, you're not a bad person, you're not a bad boy, but you made a bad decision.
Yep.
So that we want there to be a difference. We really want to separate that for our kids. Like, I'm not saying you're bad, but the choice that you made was not the right choice, and so there are consequences for choices.
Yeah.
But discipline is training. There's so much communication that happens that should happen as we discipline and train our kids. And it can really be freeing and be a way to bring calm to a situation that's not calm.
Yeah, and an example of that is like, let's say our 5-year-old son, Rustin, is doing a huge Lego creation that he just came up with on his own. And then maybe his little sister or brother comes and destroys that. His reaction to that is typically pretty volatile, and he'll erupt, he'll yell, sometimes he'll hit. And in that moment, we could start yelling at him and say, don't do that to your kids. You're bad for doing that. Something like that. But that's really not going to teach him anything except to be afraid of when he's doing that. And so what discipline can do in that situation is we can take that situation and use it as a teachable moment to where we can talk to Rustin, my 5-year-old, and tell him that his response to that was not right. And we can talk to our 3-year-old and say that when someone's building something, you shouldn't just go destroy it. And we can use that opportunity to teach both of them in the same moment. And that takes a lot of self-control on everybody's part there.
That's true.
Our part with not reacting right away to that situation and the yelling and the hurting and all that stuff. But we need to take a breath. I usually need to be the one to take a breath, calm myself down to be able to clearly talk to Rustin and clearly talk to Hunter and tell them, what happened wasn't right. But Rustin, we don't need to react that way. We can use our words and we can get help if we need it to help with the situation. And Hunter, that wasn't right. You shouldn't break something that someone's making. That doesn't show kindness.
Yep. It's good. So we really want to discipline the way God disciplines us. And He is long-suffering, which means that He is patient with us. We continually, at least I do, continually make the same mistakes or choose something that my flesh wants instead of what I know that I want to do in my spirit.
I think we can all kind of relate to where we know that we shouldn't do something, but we keep doing it. And then we keep returning to the Father, and He's faithful and just to forgive us of all of our sins. And so we want to take what we do with the Lord and how He treats us and bring that to our kids as well, where as our kids continually grow and learn and make the same mistakes, we're being really consistent with our responses and not getting down on them because they keep making the same mistake.
Yeah.
We want to be consistent. We want to use those moments to train them and to teach them, but we also want to do it with grace and love.
Yeah. So what's the 80% rule?
The 80% rule. With parenting and other things, if we're winning 80% of the time, meaning we're taking a breath, we're being consistent, we're using our words and communicating and using those teachable moments 80% of the time, then we're winning, really. That's a big win. Not everybody's perfect. We're not perfect by any means. And really, if we're getting that 80%, we're doing a fabulous job. If you need to work up to that 80%, that's totally cool. We need to work up to 80% in some areas. And it's really important to remember that we're not perfect. Our kids aren't perfect. We're in an imperfect world. And so we want to give ourselves grace, but still hold a high standard.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, so 4 mistakes or mistakes of discipline. One would be ignoring their bad behavior. And this is really easy when they're young. And their bad behavior is actually really cute a lot of times. But when we see that bad behavior, it's an opportunity to correct it. And even, or sometimes it's not even just maybe that it's cute. Maybe we're tired and we just don't really feel like doing it. But ignoring it doesn't typically help it just go away. Mistake number 2 is the phrase, he'll grow out of this eventually. So typically kids don't just grow out of their bad behavior. It comes up later in life. And
we can think of Like I think of my 2-year-old, my youngest, and she's not yet 2,
Almost.
actually.
Yeah.
But she is adorable, and she's our little baby girl, our last kid, and she is too cute sometimes, and she knows it sometimes. And I'll ask her to, come get a diaper change, and then she'll turn and waddle her little body away, and it's adorable.
Right.
But if I just let that keep happening, then when she's 2 or 3, when I ask her to do something, she might give me a no. And she'll smile and her big cheeks will be there. Super cute, right? But then we fast forward to, if we just ignore that behavior, fast forward to 8, 9, 10, even teen years, that little no as a 3-year-old might develop into a big, what's that word I'm looking for? A defiant behavior, where they're really turning to rebellion, which is a big sin that we want to nip in the bud at a young age.
Yep, that's good.
And so if we look at these little things at our young kids, and we nip them in the bud and continually be consistent with them as they grow and develop, then we won't have to deal with the bigger issues that come in the teen years. And we have a lot of questions for Chris and Jenna about those teen years.
Okay, mistake number 3 would be making excuses for their behavior. This could look like saying, oh, he's just shy, or she's really tired today, or she's, having a hard day. And of course, there's grace for situations that are out of the norm. Of course, we want to defend our children, but making excuses for their behavior doesn't help them in the long run and doesn't hold them accountable to the behavior that we're really aiming for.
Mm-hmm.
And then mistake number 4 would be raising the intensity of our voice when our kids are just being annoying and then blaming them for our anger.
Yeah.
So really, I'm in control of me. You're in control of you. My kids hopefully don't have control. They're not the ones making me angry. That's my choice to respond like that. And an example I thought of is just when I'm trying to get something done, whether it's reading a recipe or working, and my kids are just playing, and maybe it's fine at the beginning, but then they get a little louder and a little louder and a little louder. Instead of calmly responding to that, I can feel my irritation level rising. They're just annoying me.
And then one little thing tips it over the edge.
Right, and then maybe I yell or kind of explode on them for really what they were doing was not warranting that kind of a response.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
This is a great principle for many areas of life in general, with marriage, with coworker relationships, different things like that. Different people outside of us, we can give them control to make us angry, but it's really our choice to respond to what they're doing. And so in this parenting sense, our kids are going to do things, and we're not going to like what they're going to do, but that doesn't mean that we have to get angry or upset or yell. That's our choice to do that, and we shouldn't give them that kind of power over us, but we want to stand in truth, knowing that there's grace for us, there's grace for our kids, and we can communicate in a way that doesn't cause harm.
Yeah. So those 4 mistakes, they're ineffective at best, and they can actually be harmful. So just remember that part of that verse back in Hebrews 2:11. For the moment, all discipline seems painful rather than pleasant, but it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it.
Yeah.
So let's get into some practicals.
5 practicals for you.
5 tools of discipline. These are just 5. There's many.
Yes. Okay. And the first one comes with you with a verse from Timothy, which this is one of my favorite verses. 2 Timothy 4:2. Preach the word, be ready in season and out of season. Correct, rebuke, and encourage with great patience and teaching. This is, Paul talking to Timothy, but it really has broad sweeping applications. And in the parenting sense, we see that gentle correction that Paul talks about to Timothy. And the word correction is used to convict us Help me out, babe. What am I trying to say?
Yeah,
here?
so the first tool is a gentle correction, and that's found, our first 4 tools are actually found in this verse. And the word correction is the same word that is used of the Holy Spirit, who convicts and who corrects. And so a gentle correction is really meant for like a minor offense.
Yeah.
And it's like you kind of cut a kid off before what they're doing becomes like a bigger offense. So maybe we like see one of our kids
about to strike
like
another
raising
child.
their hand, like, oh, remember, we're going to have kind hands. Or maybe, we see one of our kids who like about to go play in a cupboard that they're not supposed to. And we might say, uh-oh, what are you doing? Or I can't.
Just kind of, those little things that we want to be consistent with, even though they're a minor thing. We want to be consistent to catch them, give them a gentle reminder, and, just use those calming type voices that we can muster in those situations where it's not, a big blow up. Maybe it doesn't need to be a long conversation with them, but just a little thing where we can kind of give a gentle reminder to get them back on track.
Yep. Okay, so tool number 2 is rebuke, warn, or admonish strongly. So this doesn't look like yelling. This doesn't mean we need to yell at our kids, but it would be a more intense voice or that look that we all probably have a version of, that our kids know that it's serious, that we mean business. But this is also, all of these, we really want to remember that they're done in love. So this is a loving rebuke. These are reserved for things that deserve more intensity, like harming somebody, harming, like destroying, part of the house. And lying is another one that is really serious in our home. So, and if we're angry at what we see, it's really best to wait and let it go until that anger has subsided. James 1 says that the anger of a man does not achieve righteousness. If we're angry, it's not going to produce a good result. Most likely it will bring shame to the child, or they will rise up in anger as well. We've definitely had those kind of power battles. So an example of this is about like not responding in anger. So one day I was working and I was in a meeting, and my 5-year-old came in like with some little micro bangs that she gave herself. And my response, like, I was pretty angry inside, but I couldn't do anything about it. Like, I didn't have the opportunity because I was in a meeting, and I just had to say, like, go back or something, go away. I'll talk with you later. And in the time that I had to cool down, I had time to reflect, like, why was I so upset? Honestly, my first reaction was because it looked pretty silly. Like, her hair looked a little bit wonky. But then I realized, like, I don't want her to think that these microbangs affect her beauty or how God made her or how I love her. And so when it came time for us to talk about what she did, there was no, thank the Lord, there was no shaming in my rebuke, because I wasn't shaming her for what she did to her hair, but more that we use scissors to cut paper. We don't use scissors to cut our hair or someone else's hair or things like that. Yeah,
and kind of breaking that down to a few steps where Andrea was met with a situation, and instead of reacting or responding, she was forced to take some time and then kind of develop a good, appropriate response to that, where Andrea was able to work out in herself why she was upset. And with this situation, it had to do with Addie's appearance. And we all know that girls in this generation, in this day and age, they are getting attacked with so many things about their appearance. We don't need to bring that on them as parents, but we want to love them and support them and show them that how they look doesn't define who they are. And so Andrea was able to realize that with Addie and give her a response that, was a great teaching point. And so that really showed us that that's a great tool to use for everything that we do. If we're feeling inside when something happens or there's a situation that hit us, we want to take a moment, maybe send them to their room to give us a little bit of a physical space, and then take some time to think about, okay, why am I upset about this? How can I respond and use this as a teachable moment? And then come to them and talk to them. And it might be a fairly intense conversation, but our kids are going to be watching us and seeing how we react to certain things. And that's kind of how they develop their view of the world and how they develop their view of how their relationship with us should be and how their relationship with the Lord should be. And so we want to be careful with our responses on how we take time and formulate a response that the Lord would want us to respond in, so that we're being gentle, we're being intense if we need to, but we're bringing it with love, with truth, and with grace.
Yeah. So the third tool is, discipline, is encouragement or exhortation. And we talked about this a lot last week.
Yeah. And this is great for those kids that are strong-willed or spirited, some people say, where, if you rise up with intensity, they're going to rise up to meet your intensity. And if you keep going, it will just continue to escalate. And as a teacher, I see this a lot with the different students that I meet. If some kids, if I rise up or if a teacher rises up, they're going to meet that level or exceed that level. And then it's just a race to the top, which there's no winners in that. So using encouragement or exhortation where you're saying, I know that you can do better, and I know that God made you this way instead of this choice that you made. This choice doesn't define who you are because I know God made you this way. And part of this is you need to know your kid's original design. You need to know how the Lord created them and what He says about them, so that you have that ammunition to then throw back at them when they're doing whatever that's kind of pushing your buttons or against your family rules or whatever. You need to be able to speak that truth and that life into them, to tell them who they are, who the Lord says they are, and how you're trying to help them get to their original design in the Lord.
Yeah. And this is really something that we know doesn't end when they're young, but we keep pressing into this tool of discipline as we have teenagers and saying, I'm proud of you for making that choice.
Yeah.
I know that was hard.
Yeah.
I know that you saw your friends doing something different, but you made a good, safe choice. Or just really, really like keeping that encouragement and those exhortations coming. Our kids will rise up to the level that we really raise for them and encourage them to.
And reward them when they do something that's hard for their flesh to overcome. If it's something that involves peer pressure and they said no to it, that's a big deal and they need to be celebrated for that. So really reward them, give them, take them on a date or give them ice cream or whatever to really let them know that you are really proud of them. Whatever they need to know that you're proud of them, you should do that when they make these big accomplishments. It may feel small at the time, but just have an open mind to realize that they did something that was hard for them, either emotionally, physically, or whatever, and reward them for overcoming that.
Yeah. Our fourth tool is patient instruction. And we talked about this even last week as well, but this is really teaching and training. And if we think about how it says love is patient, like our discipline, we discipline because we love. And so what does love look like? Love is patient is one of the things. So that could, mean this is just instructing them. This is how you could have handled that situation when your sister came and drew all over your artwork. Let's practice. Addie, I didn't like that you did that. And then Addie, like literally role playing, having your kids role play. How could we have said that differently? And if they don't have an answer, then we can help them come up with an answer. Totally. So this tool, patient instruction, I like this one because it's really hopeful. We're speaking hope into a situation, and we're believing as parents that our kids will come out of this, and eventually that they will get these, that they will be able to communicate in a way like that we have instructed them to. So this obviously takes time. I've heard the phrase like parenting, it's like brick, like you're building a wall, like brick by brick by brick, or you're building something, maybe not a wall, but it doesn't happen all at once. Like we're making investments and deposits slowly. Yeah.
All right, the fifth tool, the last tool. This one's kind of a big deal, and it could be a touchy subject for some of you, so we really want to preface this with, knowing your own personal parenting styles and kind of your background, your history, and things that you might struggle with, this is spanking, or the rod of correction as the Bible refers it to. And, we want to be as sensitive as possible. And so we're going to do our very best to do that. But this is kind of what we've read from the Bible, different resources that we found, talking about spanking and whatnot. But again, we don't want to do spanking never out of anger.
Right.
If you have anger issues, don't spank. If you have maybe a history of abuse, don't spank. You got to be mindful of who you are and what you've been through as a person, and know if spanking is something that you should do.
And God uses this sparingly and out of love. Like, this is not the primary tool we gave. This is the 5th of 5, and of course there are many more.
Yeah.
But so like Tony said, should never be used out of anger. And have we made mistakes in the past in this area? Yes.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about, asking for forgiveness, and that there's grace, and coming back around to your kids and saying, I was angry and I should not have done that. Will you please forgive me? But we're going to read some verses.
Yeah, and that's really important.
Yeah.
So we want to get into the Bible right away with this one. And so coming to you from Proverbs 23, verse 13. Do not withhold discipline from a child. If you strike him with a rod, he will not die. If you strike him with the rod, you will save his soul from Sheol.
And another one, Proverbs 13:24 says, the one who will not use the rod hates his son, but the one who loves him disciplines him diligently. So using the rod of correction, this is a firm way of training your child. And like we said, it's used sparingly. It's not the primary tool of discipline. It should be kept very predictable and only used for specific offenses. It should be used for a short period of time in parenting. For us, when we spank, we talk about it first, really, and we ask our kids, why are we in this situation? If they can't answer, we'll help guide them. And then after we spank, we always follow it up with a hug, and like, I love you, I'm proud of you, and we embrace our kids, so that we don't want to end those kind of scenarios on that like intense note. We really want to end it with love.
Yeah, and it's important to remember the 80% rule with this. By no means have we done this perfectly, and I don't know of any parent who has, but we feel like if we can do this great 80% of the time, then we're winning. And knowing that we haven't done that, and there's grace for that, but coming back around and apologizing when we haven't done that, that's huge. So that 20% of the time, if you're not doing it perfectly or you did it out of anger, it's so important to come back around, admit your faults to your kids, ask for forgiveness, work it out, talk about it. It's okay to be emotional about this type of a thing, because it's so important that our kids know that we love them and that we're not just trying to hurt them or to make them submit, but we're coming at them to teach them, to guide them, to build them up into who God's called them to be. And if we don't do that in a loving way, if we don't do that in an honest way where we're admitting our faults and asking for forgiveness, then they're going to have kind of a skewed view of what that looks like when they get older. And so it's important, like Andrea said, you follow up those really stern disciplines with spanking, with a hug, or something that shows that you care about them and you're doing it out of love and not out of anger.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, we know that we all come at parenting with different backgrounds. And so if this is a tool that you're not comfortable with using, then that is understandable. And there's obviously hope that you can raise kids that love Jesus and will serve Jesus without using the rod of correction.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to know that thinking about these tools, we just gave you 5. And so if you need to go back and figure out what those 5 are, and which one kind of fits with your parenting style, what we want and our goal out of this is that you would have a plan with discipline. Because if you don't really have a great plan, then you're just going to be reacting to whatever comes up. But if you take time to have a plan, know what you're going to do, have your kids understand what you're going to do, then you're gonna be in a better place where they know that you love them, They know that you're teaching them. Even if they don't like it, they still know that it's a teachable moment. And then you'll know that you're kind of on the right track with teaching them.
Yeah. Okay, so our next upgrade is communication. And we think this is really important because our kids don't come into the world knowing how to communicate well. When they start asking for something, it's like milk or mine
or just
food. Or actually, they start by crying. That's true. And so obviously this is an area that we think is really important to train.
Yeah.
We think it's important to have consistency in how we communicate with each other and with our kids. Like, we want our kids to see that we talk to each other, we talk to our friends, and we talk to them in a very similar way, that they aren't seeing one mom and dad at church and then a different mom and dad at home. We want to teach them integrity through how we communicate. So to teach them communication, a lot of it is more than just talking about it, it's showing them and demonstrating. So our kids watch us so much and they observe so much and they mimic so much, especially when they're younger. But I think even when they're teenagers, they do this a lot too. So how do we communicate? Do we whine to get what we want? Do we yell to get what we want? Do we demand instead of asking for something? Like, get me a water instead of, could you please get me a water? Do we say please and express gratitude when people help us? If we're married and parenting together, how do we communicate to each other? Do our kids see us contradicting each other a lot? Or do they see us agreeing? Or if we do contradict, how do they see that play out? And so we think that what they see is really, really important. Yeah.
And it's not just, how we're communicating to each other as a married couple, but it's also how we're communicating to our kids.
Sure.
So, we have multiple kids. If I'm communicating to my oldest in kind of a demanding, harsh way, then she's going to start doing that to my younger kids, to her younger siblings, which we've seen.
Yes.
Because I'm not perfect at that by any means. And so it's important to remember communicating to our kids is going to impact how they communicate to others. So we have 5 communication upgrades.
Yep.
And the first one, it's not my favorite, but that's okay. It might be your favorite. This is kind of Andrew's favorite.
It's one of my favorites.
Canned, calm responses. Sometimes I think the canned responses are cheesy, but I have to admit they're effective.
Yeah.
They are effective. So there's a dozen times throughout our day where our kids ask us for things in not very effective ways. So one of those that we see daily, about 3 times a day, is talking with food in their mouth. So instead of saying, don't talk with food in your mouth, try saying, I can't understand you with food in your mouth.
Yeah.
Another one, instead of saying, stop yelling at me, because, that's rising up with the intensity. Try this. I can't understand you when you're yelling. They won't love that, but it works.
It does.
Instead of saying, stop crying, try giving them a hug. And say this, or try to say this. I see that you're upset. When you have a self-controlled voice, I'd love to help you. That's a good one for me. I try to use that one. Instead of saying, stop asking me that, when they've asked you the same thing again and again, try saying, you asked and I answered. A few other one-liners or canned responses we have is fun or room. If they're not being fun in a situation, arguing, fighting, we say
throwing a fit,
fun or room, where you can either be fun and have fun with us or go to your room until you're ready.
And with that one, we learned this from a book, Loving Our Kids on Purpose by Danny Silk. And with that one, this starts at a young age. At least if you have young kids, I would encourage you to start this at a young age. And so when they come back from their room and they are ready to be fun, you're like celebrating, yay, are you ready to be fun? I'm so glad to see you. And so it's not a shameful, like, get away from me, you're not being fun. But it's more like, no, we have some boundaries. And you don't get to treat me like that, or you don't get to act like that in in this public space. And so if you're having a hard time being fun, you can go to your room. And then sometimes they will just stand there and say, you can say, do you want to walk or do you need me to help you? And then if they don't move, then I will just calmly pick them up, take them to their room. And this takes training for sure.
It does, yeah.
But it works. And I mean, I've seen kids, they're not my kids, but other kids that will just before their mom even says, they just go to their room and come back. And I'm like, well, that's amazing. That worked. Okay, the last canned response
is, try again.
You use that one a lot too.
She uses that
I use that one a lot. And it just, I think our kids know a lot more than we give them credit for. And so giving them the chance to try again. Try again.
Yeah.
I do that a lot. Okay, so number 2 is we encourage you to try like a zero tolerance mentality with bad communication. But remember the 80% goal. So this is not 100% of the time. But really, we're not helping our kids in the long run if we teach them that they get what they want by yelling at us or throwing a fit or demanding. So as much as we can, we don't accept demands. They must ask us.
Yeah.
And the answer might be no. We want our kids to learn, like, man, if our kids will know, if they will be able to hear the word no and not throw a fit about it, I feel like that's a big parenting win.
Totally.
And so we don't accept demands. We're not going to accept the attitude. That's where like the, try again. Or like, you said that kind of with a bad attitude or a snarky attitude. Could you try that again? Again, as much as we can, we try not to accept whiny requests. We don't accept our kids yelling at us. That's just something we're trying to teach them. Nope, we don't tolerate that in this family. And this is where our calm, canned responses come into play.
Yeah. But what if like my kid is really whining?
Yeah, so this is where
they won't stop.
So this is where
and then they do it again.
So this is where I would say, sounds like you're having a hard time being fun. Do you want to go to your room and spend some time in your room until you're ready to be fun? And if they're not going to go, then again, like I said, I'll help them get to their room calmly. Get to their room. And really with this, consistency is key. Like when we first started this, our oldest was probably 3. And I feel like she looked at me like, what are you saying? Like, what do you mean? I have other ones that Tony really doesn't love, but like where I'll say, maybe so if she's, but this is so unfair. Maybe it is. Maybe so, or I hear you, or something. And she's looking at me like, what are you saying? But it's just like, I'm staying calm. She's going up here. But if I'm down here, she might go through the roof, but likely she'll come back down faster than if we're both going to that level.
Totally.
Okay.
Number 3 with the communication upgrade tool belt edition. Think about how you're communicating and make changes if needed. So this isn't just with our kids, but more for us and how we're talking. So Psalm 139, verse 1, Lord, you have searched me thoroughly and you know me, or you have known me. And this is important because the Lord knows us and he loves us still. But he also wants to refine us and continually refine us. So we should be asking and looking at ourselves, are we making demands to our kids or to other people instead of asking them? Are we saying please and thank you? If we want to hear our kids say please and thank you, then we should probably start saying please and thank you. Apologizing to our kids, we've talked about that before on the power of apologizing. If we want our kids to understand what apologizing is and why it's important, then we need to be doing that with them when we mess up with them. I can't stress the power of apologizing to our kids enough so that they really have an understanding of what it means to ask for forgiveness or to say sorry when they've hurt someone and to really mean it in their heart. Because it's easy to, we've all seen the situation where a kid comes up, they say sorry, and then they walk away where there's no heart connection. But if they see us pouring our heart out and apologizing for something that we've done that has hurt them or hurt someone else, then they're gonna start catching on to the power of apologizing and asking for forgiveness.
Yeah, and something Tony introduced me to a few years back was when he was apologizing to one of our children for something he did. And they said, that's okay, which is quite honestly something I would say growing up.
It's a common thing to say.
That's okay. And Tony said,
Prefacing this,
okay.
I think words have power.
Right.
So saying that's okay to a wrong that's happened doesn't do the job that I want it to do. So what I have taught my kids to say, and they're still working on this, instead of saying that's okay, we say I forgive you or I accept your apology. And I bring that into my kindergarten class where there's a lot of apologizing happening in kindergarten. And the response that I often hear at the beginning of the school year is that's okay. And I want them to know that kind of bad behavior or poor choices, it's not okay, but we can forgive them and we can accept their apology and work on building that relationship back up. Right. So that's what we've kind of tried to teach our kids, where it's not okay for the wrong to happen, but we accept your apology or we forgive you for the mistake you made. Yeah. It's really powerful. Those words are powerful. This is a great challenge for number 4.
5.
Tool.
4.
4.
Sorry, number 4.
I'm on track.
Number 4.
For number 4, tool number 4, a week-long no yelling challenge. If a week sounds too long for you, start with one day. But a week-long no yelling challenge. And this can be fun to get your kids involved.
Yeah, it's for sure good for kids. Like, it's all of us.
Our kids like to yell, and we're working on that. They probably have seen it from us. So we're working on that too. And so this is a great thing where we can sit our kids down. We can tell them, okay, this week we're going to have a no yelling challenge. Mommy and Daddy are going to work on not yelling, and you guys are going to work on not yelling also. And we'll give each other reminders if we need to.
Yeah, it's not like an all or nothing thing.
Totally.
Like, oh, you ruined the challenge. Now we're done. But we gave each other grace and reminders.
And then you got to end it with a family reward. I talked about kind of rewarding your kids for when they have big accomplishments. This might be a big accomplishment for you or for us. And so we did this one week, and we did not do a great job at it. But we did better than we normally did. And so we went out for ice cream after that.
And our kids will ask for it now, and which makes me wonder, like, is it because
are we
we're
yelling too much
or what? But it's pretty fun.
It is fun.
Okay, number 5, for real, number 5. The 5th one is to try to increase thankfulness and communicate that with your kids. I think it's really easy to just assume that our kids, we assume that our kids will do what we say, and we want them to do what we say, but we want to show that we're grateful. Our kids contribute a lot to our family, as they should. Yeah. Like, our kids they pitch in, they do chores, they help out, which they should do. That's normal, and we think that that's appropriate. But we really want to communicate that we appreciate them, that we appreciate their help and their effort. Our kids want to hear that we're grateful for them. Just like I want to hear, like, if I'm, making dinner night after night after night and Tony doesn't say anything, like, that gets a little bit defeating and discouraging to me. Like, I just want to hear that he appreciates me, which you do. And so that's, I believe that our kids want to hear that we appreciate this. And this isn't to manipulate them into doing more things, but it's really just to show them that we love them. And they're really motivated by our approval, as we said before.
Yeah. So. Okay, so that's it for all those upgrades. We just hit you with a bunch of stuff, a fire hydrant of upgrades and tools that you can use. Don't try to do them all at the same time. Pick 1 or 2 that you want to try this week and try to be consistent with it. Try to do it to the best of your ability. Talk to your kids about it. But yeah, give it a try. If you try to do all of this at one time, you're probably going to be a little bit overwhelmed and feel like a failure. And so we want you to be successful in this. So try one thing this week is my challenge to you.
And some resources that we used in creating this topic today. One is the book Loving Our Kids on Purpose by Danny Silk. Yeah. Another book is Raising Passionate Jesus Followers by Phil Colmer. And then the third is the same podcast and website we talked about last week, which is the Intentional Parents Podcast. and their website. They have a lot of good tools and resources.
Nice. And we want you to be able to get help if you need it. If you're seeing like some of these areas, you're really struggling with anger, or you're seeing a pattern of your response kind of going way over the top for not a very big incident, then we want you to be able to get help. Don't wait for someone to approach you about that, especially in quarantine. No one's going to really be seeing what you're doing. So don't wait, but reach out for help. Find a friend who can kind of pray you through that repentance of those areas and kind of dig into what's at the root of why you're responding that way. Because typically our responses to things are kind of what's on the surface, but there might be something deeper that the Lord is trying to refine you in. And so really take that opportunity not to shut down in shame that you're failing as a parent, but to reach out to help and realize that the Lord is wanting to grow you in your original design and your design as a parent. And so let the Lord do that. Be open to Him bringing things to the surface. And it usually comes in your reaction to something, or maybe you're shutting down to something. And so be willing to either pray with your spouse or a friend, or call into our prayer teams and get that help to really refine you as a person and as a parent. And if you can't, if you don't have a friend, again, our prayer teams are readily available and wanting to pray with you through these things.
Yeah, and the last thing I would say is our kids are very forgiving, and they will see you make mistakes, and they will see you make changes, and they'll recognize if they're old enough, like, oh, Daddy is talking differently to me now than he did before. Daddy's nicer, or whatever. But they're really forgiving and resilient, and so to not let those mistakes hold us back from moving forward with using some of these tools. I think that there's like the error of rising up too much, but there's also the error of just sitting back and letting things play out and not addressing things. And so to not let those, like your past hurt and pain, or like the mistakes that you've made, keep you from moving forward with your kids. Your kids will forgive. They will be resilient. They love you. Like they love you through those mistakes. So
Totally.
Okay.
Totally.
Next
Next week is our last Parenting Infusion, and we will be answering a lot of your questions. We'll be asking Chris and Jenna some questions. They'll ask us some questions. So please send those questions in to that Slido link on the bottom there. And we really look forward to doing that with Chris and Jenna. They have a bunch of knowledge. They read a lot of books. So we're excited about that. And they have older kids. We mainly have younger kids. So parting shot before we say goodbye is I want to encourage you guys that parenting can be really fun. You're doing a good job. Keep trying. Don't give up. Keep pushing in. Get help if you need it. And we love you guys.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.